Now, before we get started on the next phase of this, I'm going to go over here to my layers panel and select the background layer. And let's go ahead and invert this to a black background. So just simply press Command or Control I and it will invert it just to make things a little bit more visible. Ultimately, our design is going to end up on a black background anyway, so I just want to make sure that we're looking good early on. If you look at the 3D art, you'll notice it's kind of bright, a little bit of a highlight glare on the can art itself. That is due to the lighting, which we're going to adjust at the end of this module when we get all the label art all set in place. So we're going to be adjusting that in just a moment. But in this clip, we are going to add a surface effect using a water texture. We're going to go to the File menu, go to Open, go to our Project Assets folder here, and there is a file called Water Texture. So go ahead and select that and open it up, and you can see it's just this really cool running water texture, and this is going to basically act as the condensation, if you will, on the surface of our soda can. So before we move it or bring it over to our label art, first thing is we need to remove the color. I don't need the color information in this particular texture. So as before, I'm just going to go ahead and press Shift-Command-U to go ahead and desaturate the image. So I'm going to go ahead and do a Command-A or Control-A to select everything, do a select all, and then Command or Control-C to copy it to the clipboard. So once we have that, we're going to jump back into our image art here, and let's go ahead and access the label art once again. I'm just going to do it right here from within the layers panel. So just double click on label material, opens up the label art. I'm going to select the topmost layer in my layers panel, which is of course the text layer, and then I'm going to press Command or Control V, and that's going to paste that water texture in this file. And once I do that, I'm going to press Command T to activate Free Transform, and then press Command or Control 0, expands the document so that you can see the transform box there. So I'm going to reposition this right about here, maybe even rotate it. And remember, with these abstract textures, try different angles and rotations, and you'll see that you can get some really interesting looks all together there. And I think that looks pretty good right there, so that looks good. So now I'm going to blend it with the rest of the label art. I'm going to bring out my layers panel here. Notice I've got it at the top of the layer stack here, but I'm going to blend it with the rest of the image by changing the blend mode to hard light. Now obviously that's very harsh, so we need to dial it down as far as the opacity. So go and highlight the opacity setting and drop that down to about 25%. So if I zoom in here, you'll notice what we're getting is this very slight wet glare on the can or on the label art itself. Really kind of gives you that little wet look on the image. But we also want this to behave in a way that you would expect it to in real life. On the 3D surface of the can, the way the light hits it, you'd expect it to be distorted slightly around the wet areas and such like that. So to do that, we're going to apply this texture as a bump map. So to do that, while we're inside of this document, and you'll see that we've got that layer selected, do another Command-A to select all, and then Command-C to copy to the clipboard. Now the reason we're copying this one and not the one we did earlier is that we've brought this one into the working file. I need this to be a bump map that is the exact same size as the label art itself. So it just makes it easier just to do a Command-A and then copy what is already placed into this file. So that is copied to the clipboard. I'm going to go ahead and close this and save the changes on the label art. Now, back in our 3D art, I'm going to open up my 3D panel once again and my properties panel. And we're back on the label material here in the 3D panel. So I've got label material selected. Now you're going to go over here to your properties panel and go down a little ways to the bump property here. So once you locate bump, click on the little menu icon next to it and choose new texture. Now it's going to remember the dimensions of the file in the clipboard, so it's keeping it the same size as the original file. So go ahead and click OK. When you have an image copied to the clipboard, it will remember it when you create a new document, those dimensions. So by creating the new bump file, it creates a new document, as you can see right here, and I'm going to go ahead and press Command V to paste that water texture also in this image. I'm going to move this over to the side a little bit, and if I hit Save, Command or Control S, you're going to see the can look a lot different. And if I zoom in here, you can see it's taking on this very rough texture based on that water texture I've got applied here. It's a little too much though. So here's what we're going to do. Back in that bump map file, we're going to go to the filter menu, go to blur and choose Gaussian blur. Now I'm going to set this to about 3 pixels. Doesn't need to be any more than that. So a 3 pixel Gaussian blur and click OK. And I think I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit of a levels adjustment on this texture as well. So I'm going to press Command or Control L, bring up levels, and let's just boost the contrast just a little bit by nudging the midtone slider to the right just a little bit. And then click OK. So I'm going to close that and save the changes, and now we can see the label art has smoothed out quite a bit. But the bump intensity is still a bit much. So back in these panels, we've still got the label material selected here in the 3D panel. And over here in the properties, in the bump setting, you'll notice that the default setting is 10%. Let's take that and drop it down to 5. So now if I go and grab my soda in the 3D panel, you can use the 3D tools to move around the object, and you'll see that the bump map is reacting to the light. As I move it around, you can see the texture itself that's on the diffuse property, but the dimension that the water elements are taking, and you can see how it's reacting to the light, that is because of that bump map there. So that's adding a level of realism, and when we bring it into our final scene, it's going to add that much more realism to it. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit, and let's reset my default camera view here. So select current view, go into the properties panel and choose default for the camera. We'll zoom back out here. And all is looking really well for the soda can so far. So we've got the surface texture applied, and now we're ready to modify the lighting, and that's what we're going to take a look at in the next clip.